This is the Filmmakers Hangout Podcast. I am your host, Brandon Fiscus. My co-host right over here is...
I'm Landon. Howdy.
Are you muted?
I am now, yeah.
Okay.
Temporarily.
And then our guest today is Mike. Michael, which way do you want to go?
You can call me Mike, sure.
Okay, Mike. Feel free to introduce yourself fully.
Well, sure. Hi, I'm Dr. Mike White. I'm a film professor at Wayne State College. That's my day gig. But I'm also an independent filmmaker. Kind of been around for a while now. And yeah, pretty much it. I live in Sioux City, Iowa, but I tend to make films primarily in Iowa, Nebraska, South Dakota, kind of that tri-state area. I'm very active in all three scenes, actually.
Very good. And what would you say, you mentioned that you're a filmmaker, you're a teacher, professor. What would you say is your niche area in filmmaking? Like if you had to pick one thing, is it writer, director, or do you like to do both equally? Where would you have to like shoehorn yourself in if you had to?
Such a tough question. Well, I mean, if I go back in my mind, I originally wanted to be a sound engineer, but I think the way that things work out is that I don't know if everyone is conscientiously becomes a filmmaker. I think it's something that if you're a storyteller, it just kind of happens to you. For me, especially, I started out in sound and kept getting pulled more and more into writing and directing. I've always written my entire adult life. I have a great love of writing. So even though I think of myself as kind of a hack writer, I have been writing, I've written a variety of things. I've made a variety of short films, 4 feature films, those kinds of things as well, all of which I've written. Also too, I don't feel like I'm as strong a director as I probably am a writer. But also too, I have a great love of post-production. So I guess you could say I love the beginning and the end.
Okay.
And I always get a little help with the principal. So, that's really kind of the case. But also I think as a teacher, I'm a film theorist too. So, like today we had a big talk in Women in Film about, Harvey Weinstein and the implications of that. And also we watched a film by Julie Taymor and those kinds of things. I can talk to you about why Godard matters. And then we can also talk about, they're shooting your film. So those are all things that I love.
Very good. So you kind of like to be able to do the more in-depth thinking of it, not necessarily the baking of the bread.
Yeah, I think so. I think in order to be a great filmmaker, you also have to be a bit of a lifetime student. When
Yes.
I am not on set or writing or creating, I am watching. And I believe in what I call yellow pad watching. So, for example, whenever I watch a picture, the last Yorgos Lanthimos picture came out, and I watched that picture, and then first you watch it for enjoyment, then you watch it again with a yellow pad on your lap, and you're taking notes about cinematography and story and color, and you're trying to learn because I know there's always that expression, nothing ruins your ability to enjoy films more than being a filmmaker, because you have to take it apart to understand it. So for me, if I'm not making movies, I'm studying movies and I'm thinking about movies all of the time.
Even my wife hates me now. Like we'll be watching a movie and she'll notice something because she picked something up in the background. She's like, I hate you. And I'm like, what? What happened? She's like, they didn't do this. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So,
or especially if you'll notice a flaw in the writing and you're like, what is that? Yeah. And students always say that to me too. They said, oh yeah, I took your class and now my parents, tell me to shut up during movies. So it's like, it is one of those things. But fortunately, my partner and I, we watch a lot of stuff together, and she's as passionate about film as I am. So, I think, that to be able to share that with somebody is pretty awesome.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And it's not necessarily the same type of relationship, but the guy right next to me right here in the studio, that's kind of what we do, is we kind of be able to share that on set and off a set, you know, so it's kind of cool that we are able to have somebody to share that with. And then that way it's not just like, oh, I need to find my people, you know?
Yeah. Well, and
So,
those ideas too. I mean, I think filmmakers lead a little bit different life, I think, in some ways. It's not just what we do, it's how we live in a lot of ways. I mean, we're ridiculous. I mean, we're to the point of like, hey, guess what? The Venice Film Festival released its offerings. What's going to be on? And we're pouring through it looking for things, and
mhm.
we're listening to podcasts and reading reviews and trying to learn what's up. And, you know, because I also teach, I'm also, you know, what is the new camera? What was just released? And how can this make our filmmaking better? So I don't know. I think I look at filmmaking as a constant form of self-improvement.
Right. We're always learning. We're always bringing in
Yeah.
more information, how, what, when, where, why, and it's
Yeah.
not just for our stories, it's for the production itself. How are we going to be able to do that down the road, kind of thing? One of the tools that a lot of people are talking about right now that it's a little sour note in the community is like AI, and
Mhm.
what's that going to do with it and things like that. But I still like researching it. I still like to play with the tools because that way I know what can and can't be done, but then also what I don't want to do with it, you know, that
Yeah.
kind of thing. So there's, you know, I always look at it as like Photoshop. Well, there's a lot of tools there that aren't me and my hand and my palette, and my pen, but I still use it. Nobody gives
Yeah.
me any guff that I didn't create it when I did. So
Mhm.
there's it's gonna be a mix. There's, you know, sour notes with everything. You know, certain
Yeah.
people said that about color in film at one point.
Well, I think too, I mean, like I see AI is taking a lot of the monotony out of doing things. Because if you look at sound, you know, when RX10 came out, and RX10 is what, $100, it completely changes the quality of your sound, right?
Yep.
It's an absolutely fantastic thing. And it's AI. It takes all that background hush out, and it does things that used to take hours and hours to do, you
Yep.
know, in the studio. And that's one of those things that works out great. I just saw a new plugin that works with the Arri Alexa, and it also works with some of the Red cameras, and it can geographically track the motion of a camera and integrate that into use with Unreal Engine. So, oh my gosh, that takes
Right.
hours of work out of something. I'm not, you know, I'm for AI as a tool to take the monotony out of things, just as long as it doesn't impede our creativity
Right.
and it
Or
starts writing our
replace
stories.
artists.
That's a completely different thing. But I mean,
Right.
as a tool to do some of those things that, you know, even cutting things out of backgrounds and rotoscoping,
Right.
those things
That's a
took
form of it.
hours and hours before. And now let the computer do it so you can be
Yeah.
creative with that extra time.
Yep.
And that, you know, to me, that's really what a lot of those tools are.
Exactly. What is like the go-to film that you like try to tell your students that they should watch no matter
Mhm.
what? What is
Um,
that one?
it's a little bit of a trick question because
No, yeah.
I do it like this. I always say if you're going to watch a classic Hollywood film, watch Casablanca. If you're going to watch a great foreign film, watch Breathless or Never Look Away. You know, I've got one kind of for each genre a little bit. If you want to start with science fiction, watch the original cut of Star Wars from 1977. Because there's a lot of innovative things that you can learn
Mhm.
in those things. So I think the most loaded question to me in the world is what is your favorite movie? Because
Yeah.
there's, you know, I was just in the library here at the college and we have thousands of movies down there. And you know, how do you pick just one when they
Just
do
one.
so many different things and they make you feel so many different ways? It's really tricky. So I always answer that question with I have a different favorite in each genre.
Nice. Well, and also, you know, time and life changes, so
Oh yeah.
your favorite's always going to change too, because even if they stopped making movies tomorrow,
Mm-hmm.
your mood is going to change tomorrow, so then your favorite movie might end up changing, you know? So there's a
Yeah,
lot of
and they
that.
hit at different life stages, you know? I mean, it's interesting, like, I remember watching Casablanca when I was young, and I remember what that film was like, and I was looking at it for different reasons. Technical, you know, what's it like to shoot in black and white? What is some of the shadow influences and things that are in there. Why is this a great story? Considering they were making so many movies back then, how did this picture come about to be a great film? And now I see it years later and I'm like, well, what were the people going through when their country was occupied and they were hiding in this neutral place? And, I mean, you're as a person, you change and your life condition, your life experience changes. And the same picture can hit a different way every few years, depending on how you
Right.
watch it. And, it's great to revisit those films every so often, especially the ones that you love, to see how they hit.
No, and I think it hits for personally just the same person over time. It can hit different because of life, you know, challenges and changes. But do you see it maybe hits different for generation as well? So like when you first watched Casablanca as a younger individual, somebody your age when you first watched it, now watching Casablanca, it's going to hit a little bit different than it did when you did.
Well, and I think audiences change. It's really weird because every year I'll have like a film criticism class, and it's very strange. Like this year, I showed Casablanca, and about half of the class really loved it. They all understood why it was important, but they didn't love it.
Right.
I watched Psycho the next week, and they loved Psycho, but they're like, yeah, it's not really that scary. And the thing you have to explain to them is it's the zeitgeist of the time, and what is that? Also, movies move different. Like if you watch those movies from the 40s, the dialogue is so quick in them and stuff, and their ear isn't ready for it. They're not picking up jokes and stuff because they're a different generation of people, so that's
Right.
different too. Um, it really kind of depends. I mean, I think we get attuned to certain things in storytelling, and it's what you're kind of used to. I love it though when I get a student that's like, "Oh, hey, Dr. White, I watched this French movie from 1966, and it was brilliant, and I got a lot from it." And then it's really rewarding because you're like, "Oh my
Right.
gosh, this kid gets it."
Exactly.
And that's the kid you're looking for. That's what you're hoping you find when you teach film.
So I'm going to ask you the question that all parents hate. Basically, who's your favorite child, but in film aspect. So like I kind of asked what's your favorite movie or what's the favorite movie that you tell your students to go watch. But out of the movies that you've made, can you pick your favorite kid?
Of
Like your
the
favorite
films that I've
movie that you've made?
I like The Cross probably the best. And part of that, it was a love letter to my family.
Okay.
And if you're not familiar with the picture is it was inspired by actual events. My family was targeted by the Ku Klux Klan in a rural Iowa town in what was almost 1930. The story takes place earlier than that for a variety of reasons, but and when we look at that, too. There was a letter that was kind of a testament to the strength of the people in my family, especially like my grandmother and those people. Um, it was incredibly difficult to make, and I felt a lot of pressure to make that film when I made it because my mother had become ill, and we weren't sure if she would live long enough to see the film, so we were under a lot of pressure to finish the picture. But of all the films, I'd say that is probably my favorite of the pictures, um, and it may always be just because of those reasons.
Right. It's the ones that have a little bit more sentimental connection that tend to resonate with us. Like we just had Chance in here. Me and
Mhm,
him worked on our Christmas movie called The Visit,
mhm,
and I have sentimental connection to that because of just the way that my year was going. I had a lot of, you mentioned your mom was sick and things like that early on in
mhm,
that year. I had both of my grandparents pass, my father-in-law
mhm.
pass, all in the same beginning of the year. So that movie came along and it was kind of telling that story too, in a weird way. So in a weird way, it's always going to have that emotional connection with me, but it was kind of therapeutic as well. Have you ever had a movie or a script or anything like that kind of allow you to have that therapeutic moment that you're like, oh, it's so good to just get this out and on paper somewhere, not just
Yeah, I'm
necessarily like a goal but like an actual emotional?
Well, I think so. I mean, I think filmmakers use film for different reasons. I think back now, I made To Live Again. And when I made that film, I was going through a lot. I was married for 30 years and I was getting divorced. And now I look back at that picture. At the time, it didn't feel like it. And we screened it recently, and we had a lot of people in the audience. And film ended, I could hear people crying, and I was like, and then I realized I was like, wow, this film's really, really sad. And it's like, and then I realized it's like, well, it's kind of like all my pain is up on the screen. And at the time, I thought I'd written this kind of up, happy film because it has a positive ending, but it wasn't. It was just really this thing. And I look at the filmmakers that I appreciate the most. I mean, my favorite films are the New York family dramas, the Noah Baumbach films, the Tamara Jenkins films. Those kinds of films are my favorite. Even some of the Woody Allen films, the New York family drama, and it was that film for me was kind of the New York family drama. And I didn't realize when I made that film how much of myself was in it until the film was done. It was actually inspired by a friend who'd had a similar life situation. And it's about someone whose wife has died and he has to try to find his life again. And after it was done, I was like, wow, this is a lot more of me than I realized at the time. And I think it probably was. It was probably a big part of me getting through that chapter of my life in a lot of ways. But also in The Cross too. I mean, The Cross did some things for me that I didn't expect it to. We built a replica of my grandfather's restaurant, which would have been 100 years
Wow.
ago. And to be able to sit in that restaurant, to go back in time to
Right.
experience a place that I had only heard about was really cool to be able to sit there and feel that. And then we went to Lorenz, Iowa, where my grandfather owned this restaurant, and it was really an emotional thing to be able to walk up to the door to where this place was that Grandpa worked every day. It was really cool. Um, and then also too, I mean, I think um, Jessica Johnson, who's a great actress from the Omaha area, everybody knows Jessica. She's
Yep.
dynamite, and she actually played the role of my grandmother in this. And our makeup and hair folks are just so great, and they did her hair and they dressed her, from photographs that we had of my grandmother, and it was really weird to have her walk in and to be looking at like my grandmother, who I only knew as an older woman, to see her as this younger person. um, and I think you don't get to do that. People don't get to go back in time 100 years to
Right.
know their family. And the research got me to know my family. And my grandmother was this extraordinary person. I just knew her as a sweet little old lady who would bake, but she
Yeah.
wasn't. She was this business person. She made designer hats and she baked in my grandfather's restaurant. She was instrumental in trying to get a church in her town. And she was this powerhouse woman in a time period where women weren't. And it was really cool to do that. And I came away from that project very changed
Right.
about, who my family was. I think it was really cool.
That is so awesome. Like, it kind of reminds me, I had a package in the mail one day and it was video cassette tapes, VHSs, and I popped them in the VCR. Yes, I still have one. And they were old reel to reel tapes that were converted that my grandfather recorded that I didn't realize he did. So like it was like when my grandmother was young, my dad was just a baby and things like that. And it gave me an insight into their life that I never realized, being their grandkid, obviously. But the fact that they went on the lake on the boat, never knew they did that kind of stuff, let alone that my grandfather had a video camera back then. I'm like, what? That kind of stuff, and the fact that I had an aunt, and for the longest time I knew her, she was always wheelchair bound because of diabetes.
Mm.
Well, in these videos, I see her walking around,
Mhm.
so it definitely, it's crazy that, you're able to create that
Yeah.
again for yourself and others. And mine was something that was kind of a time capsule that I didn't even realize existed. So it was
Yeah.
just kind of a happy accident on that. But the fact that you were able to create it kind of for yourself, but also be able to share it for other people to understand and, tell that story and bring it back to life. So you didn't just have to live it, other people can experience and maybe even learn from it in a different way in a different time.
I think something that one of the most interesting things that had happened is after we screened the picture, we had so many people come up to us and they said, my family was also targeted by the Klan. And we had tons of people do that. And we also had people come up and say, my grandfather was a member of the Klan. And that was like, wow. So it was a really cool thing. I think, especially we went back to Lorenz, Iowa, where this story takes place. And they asked me to give a lecture, and I gave a lecture. And there was a woman in the crowd. And she said, well, on behalf of the town of Lorenz, we wanted to apologize.
Wow.
100 years later. So it was
Wow.
this really cool thing that had kind of came full circle.
Mhm.
But there is a downside though too, because I mean, the night we had to burn the cross, we went out to Smithland, Iowa to burn this cross, and we got it all set up, and the fire department was so wonderful and so gracious, and they decided to burn this, and we had all the extras dressed in Klan outfits, Klan robes for this. Um, there, I can tell you, it's absolutely horrifying when that cross lit, and to see those guys stand around that cross and raise their arms. Um, it was horrible. And then I just was sitting there, it's like, well, this is something my family had to endure. They had to do this. And I'm not going to lie, there were times during the production that I was like, am I picking at the bones of this very painful thing that should just be forgotten? Or is this a really important story that needs to be told? And ultimately, I had Shelby, my co-director. She's the voice of reason in all of this. Actually, she directed that scene, the scene where the cross is burning, because I told her at the time, I said, I don't think I can do this. And of course, she's a brilliant, brilliant producer director. She just picked it right up and just ran with it. And her and Allie Boyd, our cinematographer, she's great. So they picked it up and they did it. And I just got to sit and watch. And even the firemen that were there were like, this is horrible, telling this thing. And I think ultimately, though, that question of, is this a story that's important and needs to be told? And Shelby was like, yeah, Mike, you need to see this through, because it's painful and horrible, but it's going to end up being something important. And I hope it is. I hope the picture is important and feels important to people. I think it's a story you don't hear very often. So,
Right. Well,
um,
I think it also tells a different side of things that not the general public realizes, that, when we get into certain stories and movies or even history of telling it, it can be very one-sided or very
oh yeah.
stereotypical. So like the Klan is typically known as a very racial motivated, only picking on one group of people,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not the case, and being
Oh
able to
yeah.
see it in that other light can show everyone across the board that no, there was hate across the board for all different kinds of people.
Oh
And,
sure.
and not everybody knows that. So, in a weird way, we're learning while making movies, but sometimes the movies telling the story that needs to be told teaches as well.
Well, and
So,
a story like that is a contemporary story. We don't realize that because, there's a lot of talk politically about closing the borders. We want to close the
mhm,
borders, lock the borders, right? But that is not new. The closed borders has gone on for over 100 years.
yeah,
The thing is they didn't want Italians, they didn't want Irish, because there was this whole thing is that these were inferior people, and that they were going to they were going to muddle our genetics and make us inferior in some way. Um, and that whole thing of like, well, we need to close these borders. And of course, too, poverty breeds crime. So they say, well, the Italians, they bring crime. Well, they bring poverty, and with poverty comes crime, right?
right.
So one of those things was that um, the idea of immigrants, they hated the idea of immigrants, of course, because you had real Americans. We hear that now, real Americans, right? And then also on the other side of that too is both Irish and Italians tended to be Catholic, and because of that, by extension, they hated Catholics. Um, Iowa, especially, there was more Klan activity in Iowa than there was in the South during that period of the 20s and 30s. And it was largely that. It was largely religious, is what that basically was.
And it just goes to show you that, we doing the research, personally or just for the film, for the story, we can bring up stuff that maybe we didn't even realize. Was there any like aha moment for you while doing the cross that, other than just personal reasons for family, something that you learned that you were like, holy crap?
We learned a lot about the working dynamics um, of the clan in the region. Very fortunately, Nebraska Public Television had done some work on it. There's a really good reporter from Des Moines. I can never remember his name. He had done some work on this. So we were able to learn kind of more about the operation. And something I think that was really upsetting in this is that after the film was released, a woman in the Lorenz area contacted me and says, I think we have something you'd be interested in. And when we went to the premiere, she had all of the hoods from the clan members that were there. They had found them in a building in Lorenz. So it was
Wow.
this thing of like how real that really was.
Right.
And it was in the bank because the people who were Klansmen, they weren't, necessarily just drinking buddies. They were lawyers, they were bankers, they were the top people in your community. And that was something that I had never really thought about a lot, that someone who may come and eat in your restaurant may also be burning the cross on your yard later that night. So, I mean, that was something that I think was really surprising to me. And I don't know. I mean, every time I think the world is better, I'm not so sure.
Right. Um, to maybe get away from some of the more emotional side, do you have another project that you're looking forward to in the near future here?
Well, yeah, when we were making The Cross, I swore I would never do another period film ever again because it was so incredibly difficult. We had 96 costumes in a room and we built sets and brought in props, and I swore nonstop and I said, I hate this. I'm not doing this anymore. And turned out The Cross did really well. And we have distribution and The Cross is available and it's done really, really good. And then everybody's like, boy, you're really good at making period dramas. And as much as I hated doing it, it seems to be what we maybe are good at. So I'm writing a new film. I've been working on it. It's called The Painter. I've been working on this project for a while. And it's about a World War I soldier who comes home and he has very severe PTSD. Prior to the war, he was a gifted painter. He was just emerging as a gifted painter. But can't paint. He's too troubled to paint. And he gets brought by a wealthy family to their property in hopes that he can paint. He lives on their property and tries. When he has a very difficult time until he meets their daughter and feels very inspired by this woman. So he is falling in love with a woman who's in a higher social class than him, and they become lovers. And it's about how that unfurls. And it's kind of a cross between an artist biopic and Lady Chatterley's Lover. So it is a period drama in a very different direction for me. I was inspired by a lot of different things, and I just wanted to, I had this idea one day about this and thought that it was something that we could do. We've written the script. We've had 3 table reads to get it all shored up and get it ready. We're hoping to cast the picture in December if everything goes okay. With principal production to start in mid-July of 2025.
Very good. All right. Is there any locations that you're looking at right now?
Yeah, we have a home. Actually, if you've seen the cross, the house that we used, which is in Homer, Nebraska, it's a beautiful old mansion. We're planning to shoot there. You don't see the inside of that house in the cross.
Right.
Actually, in the cross, the location where the family lives, the inside is actually in Lenox, South Dakota. The front of the house is actually Homer, Nebraska. And then when you flip the camera and show the cross, that's actually Smithland, Iowa. So that location's actually 3 locations. It's not one. You can't tell in the picture because of how it's shot, but
Movie magic.
yeah, it's the magic of movies, So we actually this time would use the interior of that house. It's a beautiful historic home. We've had a lot of discussions about the artists' quarters. We're going to try to find out an old rural building in, you know, Iowa or Nebraska to use for that. And the inside of the building we may build as a set. So we
Okay.
haven't decided that yet. Still trying to iron those out. And I'll be honest, a lot of it has to come down to money. There are grants available in different states, and we apply for the grants, and whoever shows us the money, that's where we shoot. I mean, it's going to sound
Right.
terrible, but I don't really have a loyalty to a place. I mean, whoever provides us with the resources is where we're going to shoot.
Right. The
And
loyalty is the project itself.
the loyalty is to the project. And
Right.
and that's the thing about like tax incentives and stuff. Nebraska now has tax incentive. Iowa's getting theirs ironed out. So, I mean, it's one of those things. Iowa also has a large grant system that can do some things. So it's going to kind of depend on, from from the funding standpoint, what's available to us.
Right.
We are able to produce films, fairly low cost because of resources and stuff like that. Fortunately, because I'm a professor, to contribute to my creative work as a professor, as opposed to doing research like in a library, they would rather have me on set. So I'm able to
Right.
use the same cameras and lights and sound equipment that the students
Mhm.
use for my own work. And because of that, that radically reduces the cost of production to be able to do
Well,
that.
and I'm assuming because the cross has done so well and is doing so well, there might even be more avenue there
Yeah.
for possible funding that you've already proven yourself. So
Yeah,
now,
that's one of the reasons we're right back at it, is because it's gotten a lot of attention and it's done really well. It's really great to be able to have a picture that you shoot that has a theatrical tour. Because of the Screen Iowa network, we screened through theaters all through the state of Iowa. Something that was really terrific about that is, I mean, we had some engagements that were 2 and 3 weeks long in theaters,
wow.
where it was, and then it was really fun to get like residual checks. We get checks in the mail of, okay, this is how your film did this last 2 weeks. And it was nice. And we were able to earn back some of the costs that we put into the picture ourselves. And, when we make films, we always pay actors on distribution. So if it gets distributed, you get paid. If it doesn't, nobody gets paid. So now we're just getting ready to start sending out those checks to the actors to start paying people. So it's really great to have actors commit time to a project and be able to be rewarded for their skill and their ability. So we can do that. Ideally, we would love to have the money up front to be able to guarantee payment, whether
Right.
there's distribution or not, but that, it's not very real in this part of the country.
Correct. And we are trying to, build up. That's what all of us are trying to do now, is trying to have that community of filmmakers that we're trying to make it to where we can all pay each other to do their jobs on a set. And we all have to understand that it will come. It's just, we got to keep working at it to have that work. Just to kind of liven up the mood, liven up the thing, we like to cut it over to Landon every once in a while here. And he asks some off the wall kids table questions. So,
Okay, I'll hold on to my chair.
All right. So I got a few for you. The first one I'm going to go with, because I've asked everybody, what is your favorite dinosaur?
My favorite dinosaur. Oh my gosh. Probably the Stegosaurus. Because I think he's cool and I think he's different. And like people, I like the ones that are different.
And then another one I have is, you find a genie. What 4 things are you wishing for? And we're going with Aladdin rules. You can't wish for more wishes. You can't bring anybody from the dead, and you can't wish for love.
Oh, okay. Well, the first wish would be the genie has to tell me the consequence of all other wishes. That one is the smart one. That way you can go ahead and go through and say, hey, what are the consequences of these? But I don't know. This is a good question because I think it's telling of someone's personality. I'm not really a person who cares about wealth very much. So, I mean, I think a lot of the things I always wanted kind of came true. But I mean, I think when we look at I would probably make a subsequent wish that helped people in some way, right?
Yeah.
Help people in pain or poverty or people that are struggling. And then also too, I mean, I would also like to go ahead and ensure some way I could continue to be creative long into my lifetime. That's something I'm working on anyway. So
That's fair. And then for the last kids table question that I have for you is, what are the top 3 animals that you believe you could beat in a hypothetical fist fight?
ooh, in a hypothetical fist fight.
And now this can be real or fictionary. Doesn't matter.
A pigeon, number 1. A muskrat, number 2. And maybe a tired weasel, not one
Okay.
that's too awake.
All right. Cool. I'll turn it back over to Brandon with the serious questions.
So yeah, we like to liven it up a little bit
That's so
too
cute.
every once in a while. Because again, we're about storytelling, and like you mentioned too, it does definitely bring up a little bit of who we are as a person answering those kind of questions. So
Oh yeah, the genie question's a good question. That'd be good, even not as a kid's table question.
I'll have to remember that. He's
Yeah,
growing
because it's
up.
really telling
He's-
about someone's personality. I think.
Well, and he really likes the fact that it's not 3, because 3 is easy, 5's easy. It's the 4.
Mm-hmm.
It's that extra one that everybody goes, oh,
I don't
so
know.
yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, he's definitely overthinking it, but in the right way.
Maybe that's good.
So, right. So, Mike, do you have anything that you would like to pitch, where the cross is going to be, where they can see it? Anything like class wise that you would like to tell the audience before we head out
Sure.
here?
Things that are going on right now is Shelby and I are working on, and if you don't know, Shelby's my partner, but Shelby and I are working on the entomologist's wife. I know she's going to be on a later episode, and she can talk about
Mhm.
that project. It's a crazy, bizarre project. If you've ever met her, her mind moves in a completely different direction. It has life-size puppets in it. The puppets are 6 feet tall.
Okay.
And it's a German expressionist film, kind of like a Frankenstein film about an entomologist whose wife has died, and he's determined to bring her back.
Very
It
good.
is bizarre and black and white and frightening, and it's very cool. The production was incredibly hard. That's something we're working on, and it should be available pretty soon. I mean, hopefully by the first of the year. It's in post-production now. And then beyond that too, please watch The Cross. The Cross is available on Amazon Prime right now. We have made deals with Future Today Video. That's the Coco Melon people. I don't know if you're aware of them.
All
They do
right.
Coco Melon. They do the Lego movie, stuff like that. We were very surprised that they wanted the picture, so they're going to do some stuff with the picture shortly too. Tubi, they're still working on our landing page, but it shouldn't be too much longer that it'll go to Tubi. But if you wanted to see the great 4K version on Amazon Prime, you can get it for the low cost of $5. So unless you want to buy it, and I think you can buy it for 15, so something like that. But you can definitely do those things. Of course, if you're interested in film study, there's our wonderful program at Wayne State College, the film production and theory program, and we do everything here. We do writing, producing, directing. We have minors in animation. We have really good study, and our students go on to fantastic careers. I think that's probably maybe one of the most important things that happens here. So that's one of the things that we have. If you're a fan of podcasts, you can watch Depth of Field. But I don't know if anybody's ever watched Depth of Field before.
Nope.
Shelby and I joke about it that, maybe it's a little highbrow, but hopefully we kind of look at it as kind of an educational way for people to look at international cinema and kind of know what's going on with gear and stuff. So please watch Depth of Field. We tend to have our YouTube videos before we have our podcast. I should say, yeah, our podcast episodes out. We're much better about doing those things. You can do that. And we travel around a lot. We're at a festival almost every weekend. So
Right.
we'll be at the Flatwater Film Festival. Come up and say hello. I love to meet people. I love other filmmakers. So come up and say hi. So yeah, so make sure that you do that because I mean that's how we learn and grow and make connections. Just come and meet with us and talk with us.
All right. Sounds good. Well, this has been the Filmmakers Hangout Podcast with Mike White. I'm Brandon Fiscus. That's Landon.
I'm Landon.
Have a good day, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.